Show will be on Saturdays from 10 to 11 and replayed on Sundays from 1 to 2. You will get to the best of Ellie 2.0 with talking about idealism with guests who come in and who are idealistic, who are trying to change the world. And you will get me, Super Idealist. Tune in. We can't wait to hear from you. And you'll hear from me Saturdays from 10 to 11.
Hey, Cudahy to all my friends and relatives in four directions. This is Robert Pilot of Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake. I'm here to ask you for your support. Finding honest Native-centered news is not easy, but with your support, we're able to provide accurate information about Standing Rock, Line 3, treaty violations, and COVID-19 in our Native communities. Please visit Native Roots Radio Network on Patreon and donate if you can. That's Native Roots Radio Network on Patreon. Pinigigi, and thank you for your support.
The world has changed. Our economy has changed. And now, more than ever, it's important that your retirement savings is set up to generate income, real money in your bank account month after month while still controlling your principal. And that's what we do. We're Ferguson Financial. We set up people for retirement income. Call us today, 888-429-5569, and check out our retirement income program, Sunday mornings at 9.
I love my Toyota vehicles, so when I have to get service done, there's only one place I go, Rudy Luther Toyota. They know Toyotas inside and out. It starts with them checking your alignment and tire treads with the Hunter Quick Check Drive Inspection Service. Oil changes, tires, batteries, wipers, no matter what you need done, they can help you with reliable Toyota parts and the best service team in Minnesota. Check their website, rudyluthertoyota.com, for service and parts specials just for your Toyota vehicles. Get your Toyota serviced at Rudy Luther Toyota, 394 and 169 in Golden Valley.
With your AM 950 weather, I'm Brett Johnson. Look for clear skies tonight with a low around 52, Friday sunny with a high near 78, and Saturday sunny with a high around 80. Eat Local Minnesota is a great way to find locally owned Minnesota restaurants and food purveyors. They feature high-quality food and unique eating experiences for your next meal. Some of those restaurants include Hazel's Northeast and Cafe Latte. Find a full list of all of those restaurants at eatlocalminnesota.com.
Portions of Native Roots Radio may be pre-recorded.
It's a good day to be indigenous.
Get up, stand up.
They are going to become more brutal.
Couldn't cut, hitting cut again.
Because all the hippies are trying to be Indians anyway.
They're going to become more repressive because it's a matter of dollars and their illusionary concepts of power.
Hey, Victor.
We must live in balance with the earth.
And also with recent happenings at Wounded Knee.
I am awake.
Welcome to Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake, and I'm your host, Wakanja Hade. Hey, Cudahy to all my friends and relatives in four directions. You are listening to Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake, and I'm your host, Robert Pilot. We discuss local, national, and Native news events all over Turtle Island. And as you know, Haley and Robert, Native issues are human issues, and human issues are Native issues.
You're right, Dega, and this portion of the show is supported by the Native American Community Development Institute in Minneapolis.
I have the shirt on, and I've been really practicing.
Nice shirt, Robert.
Mac D. Oh,
Mac D. Good job.
You know what's really exciting, Robert? We're going to be on all hour, and we're going to really talk about a lot of things here. One of the things, how exciting this month has been in many, many different ways because of Indian Month here in Minnesota, but also what's happened at the Capitol here. And it's great to be a Minnesotan. And just like today, I saw you today at this great Ho-Chunk event. And one thing I want to scoop everybody on, Robert, and I know we've talked about this in a good way, is starting in June, like the first week in June, Native Roots Radio is going to be on at 5 p.m. And the end of rush hour. But what's exciting too is that we can really do the live events that are happening all over Turtle Island. And I know your group specifically, Robert, has so many things going on at the same time as the 6 o'clock hour was. So it's going to be fun to be out there live and doing live events. And I know if we're doing NACD things, you'll be there with your headphones on and helping me out there too. So I'm really excited to just bring that up, and Haley and I are excited. we'll probably be doing some shows from Target Field to prior to the
Cool.
Minnesota Twins games. So we got a lot of fun things happening, and it's great to have a partner like you and somebody that's been on, I would say 4 years at least you've been on our show, right, Robert?
It's been a long time, hasn't it?
Well, hey, it was great seeing you today. Let's start out a little bit today, recognizing Ho Chunk, but also having a great little memorial for Marlene. And I know you were really, really close to her, and she's one of those Ho Chunk warriors here in the Twin Cities and known all over Turtle Island. She passed away over a year ago and duly missed. And I'll tell you one thing, Robert, and I know you helped me with my campaign as legislator. So did Marlene. She was on the smoke signal phone all the time, promoting me in a good way.
She was whipping up those votes for you. And the event today, the Marlene we're talking about is Marlene White Rabbit Helgamo. She was a reverend at All Nations Church here in South Minneapolis, right off the American Indian Cultural Corridor. She was the first woman ever ordained in the Lutheran Church, or first Native woman ordained in the Lutheran Church. And she just was this amazing person. And, she had this national network. She was very engaged locally. You heard from people today, and since she's passed, just how much we valued her mentorship, her leadership. Today, Mike Gozi of the American Indian Community Development Corporation made the point that that when Marlene asked you to do something, you just did it, and that she was able to amplify her impact that way. Mike Gozi coined the phrase Marlene's minions, and I'm very honored to consider myself amongst her minion. She understood how power worked. She understood that she could make things better for Native people by promoting other people into leadership. So I think, Robert, that I know she whipped up some votes for you in your election, your Ho Chunk election, and that's just so Marlene, right? Making sure others were moving into leadership positions. And then she told you exactly what she wanted you to do, that she would get you into those leadership positions. During my time on the Minneapolis City Council, we were incredibly strong allies.
Yeah, totally. And it was emotional at times today too. She was one of the elders, and we're old people here. We're not the elder status of somebody like Mike Gozi or Marlene was. We're old Indians, but when they tell you to do something, you do something. And that's why I ran and retired from teaching, was running for a legislator of Ho Chunk Nation, which District 4, which is everywhere but Wisconsin.
Right, and so impressive. And in the church, it's a fairly small and modest church, just a few blocks off Franklin, the American Indian Cultural Corridor. And Marlene made it such a community center. It doesn't have pews, so it doesn't feel hugely like a church. But we've all spent hours and hours there. Different critical community meetings, feasts, honoring, celebrations. And I remember during my time on the city council, Marlene was committed to reactivating their fire. They have that beautiful circular fire pit just off the church. And so she would do that, and she would have someone tend the fire, and she would hold councils there, right? We'd sit in a circle when maybe there was a bad negative incident in the community, or there was some thorny problem we needed to think through, or even meet in celebration. But she really activated that fire and sitting in that circle there at the church. And so it's beautiful to see the fire going today.
Wow, really good point and a good call. Marlene's husband was there, Harvey, who's always been incredibly supportive of her, but really he has not disappeared from the community. I had a long talk with him about Minnesota and Ho Chunk and things that he knows through Marlene and their journeys together about how we're connected and how other people are connected in a good way.
Yeah, it was great to see him there. I haven't seen him for a while. I follow him on Facebook, so I know he's active, and I know he's out and about in the community. And it was nice to see some of the people who maybe didn't make it to some of the like Marlene's funeral and things stand up and give their their experiences as well. Sandy Whitehawk being one of those people, and who was very close to her, and she spoke so beautifully today as well. Funny, some funny stuff about Marlene too.
Yeah. Sandy, I met Sandy at Marlene's church because she has those great, especially pre-COVID, monthly adoption meetings. And as you know,
Right.
Rob, I'm an adoptee, and just to get connected into the community, and Marlene's part of it too for letting us use the church. There you go, right?
It was so open. I'm wondering how many of us in the community actually has keys to that church, because she would kind of distribute them so you could just go without bugging her. And Sandy Whitehawk is active and a board member in the National Boarding School Coalition, which is headquartered here, of course, works nationally. And so she is just dedicated to that cause and the work that she's doing. She was telling me today, it was interesting to hear, she's an elder, a little older than us, and she was talking about how at this point in her life, she finally doesn't get triggered at these conferences and meetings with boarding school survivors and about the trauma that our relatives faced in boarding schools. And she said that it's a more recent thing, that she can enter into the conversation and help support others without getting triggered herself. And as Native folks know, those conversations are hard to have, right? I was in a conversation today and all of a sudden I'm tearing up just talking about something from my own experience, talking to non-Native people and having to explain to them, this stuff is painful. It's painful for us to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. Wow, we just went through a whole segment, Robert, talking about Marlene, and we got a lot more to talk about. Just a quick thing about Sandy. Sandy's husband's a stand-in on that great movie. Maybe we can talk a little bit about what we know about the Killers of the Flower Moon. That's coming up here. Got a 9-minute standing ovation at Cannes Film Festival.
Right.
Sounds like it's going to be as good as we hoped.
Fingers crossed.
You're right on. Hey, this is Native Roots Radio, and we'll be right back with Robert Lilligren. Ho!
Stay tuned.
J&S Bean Factory is a Native-owned, community-supported, cozy, artsy coffee shop which offers roasted on-site beans, live music, and baked goods. Relax in the beautiful outside patio. City Pages writes, voted top 10 coffee shops. Tucked into a quiet corner of St. Paul's Highland Park neighborhood, this coffee shop roasts beans on-site from the best coffee-growing countries in the world. Located at 1518 Randolph Avenue, St. Paul. The good stuff.
If the statistics say that 1 in 3 Native women and 1 in 6 Native men have experienced sexual assault in their lifetime, it means our whole community is affected by sexual violence. 1 is too many. Don't stand by, stand up. Don't engage in acts of sexual violence, and shut down the dirty jokes, the gossip, the victim blaming and shaming. As a community, we can change the way we respond. Contact the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition to attend a workshop to learn more.
Sponsored by the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition.
Hey, Olgama, I've been hearing a lot about this term, climate justice. What is that?
Climate justice is recognizing that the negative impacts of climate change don't affect all people equally. It also means transitioning from a fossil fuel-based economy to a more sustainable future. MN350 is one of the groups that's pushing for this transition to protect our futures. You can even get involved too.
That's great, especially since I'm concerned about pipeline projects like Line 3. How can I help MN350?
Just find them on Facebook or visit mn350.org.
When it comes to mental health, connections with others can be a way forward. How do you reach out when you need someone? What do you do to support those who struggle? Whether you're struggling or know someone who struggles, see connections as comfort, hope, and joy, like sending a text, sharing a moment, offering a hug, seeing an old friend, seeing your grandma. Together we can find ways to create a path forward. Visit cmentalhealth.org. Visit cmentalhealth.org. back to Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake, and this is Robert Pilot.
This portion of the show is supported by the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition.
Yeah, longtime sponsors of the show, and what great work they do. I just have to give a quick shout out to anyone that's on Facebook or a Facebook friend of Robert Pilot. That's me. I have my birthday fundraiser for Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition. So we're not matching what we did last year. We had about $3,000 last year, and I'm getting close to 1,000. But anything you can give, $1, $5 would be just really great for this great organization here in the Twin Cities that's known nationally. I'm here with Robert Lilligren, NACD CEO, White Earth Ojibwe relative, and just all around groovy dude. Thank you so much, Robert, for coming on. And I just wanted to finish up my thought about Killers of the Flower Moon. That's that book or it's a movie based on the book from 2017 that a series of murders that happened to the Osage Nation in the 1920s after they struck oil. And it's a true story, and the movie's probably based on a true story kind of things. I thought it was really interesting, just off topic on that movie, and they got a 9-minute standing ovation in Cannes, and they'll be coming out, I believe, in October for a short years. And Robbie Robinson's doing the music, which is awesome. He's Native American. And then I just want to say this real quick thing about Lily Gladstone, who is one of the stars. She played on Reservation Dogs, the auntie that was in jail, and one of my favorite Reservation Dogs, where Willie Jackson came and talked to her aunt, and then all these relatives showed up. She showed her how to pray, and she was all kind of frumpy in her prison attire, and I didn't recognize her right away. That's how good of an actor she is.
Right. Yeah. Impressive. And it's been really satisfying to watch the media coverage from Cannes, where it was premiered, the 9-minute ovation, as you said, to see Native folks walking the red carpet. I'm kind of a red carpet fan, so Cannes is the best one going, and lots of days, right? So it's just a different vibe, right? And I can't wait to see the movie. I've read a little about it. I know that the storyline morphed from the novel, where it was sort of a mystery, right? And I think that was the original intent of the filmmakers to make it a mystery, but it's really grew into something much more about relationship, and much more human.
Right. Yeah, and we like that. Rotten Tomatoes right now has given it a 96%, and that's good enough for me, because that's people that have seen it that aren't professional inventory takers, so to speak, or critics. And so we always kind of lean towards Rotten Tomatoes, and that's probably early because it hasn't gone out too nationally, but the people who have seen it have given it a really good grade. And how can you not, with to me, being a film buff and teaching film and video over the years, Martin Scorsese, Robert De Niro, and then Martin's latest minion, so to speak, with Leonardo DiCaprio,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And the Martin Scorsese, I mean, he's no kid, right? He's 80. This project took 6 or 7 years to put together. He has to be very aware of what his, outlooks, how many more films he's going to make in his life. And for him to dedicate that much time, that much attention, and be kind of that flexible around this story, I think is amazing. And then, of course, that they put Native people up playing Native roles, go figure. And, that they're really career-making kinds of roles for these folks.
I really feel like Standing Rock really opened the door for a lot of authors, a lot of Native things. We had, Rutherford Falls as a TV show, Res Dogs after that, Prey the movie, the prequel to I Ain't Got Time to Bleed, what's the Predator. And all these things have been happening in a good way. And I feel like, and I could be mistaken, and I don't know how you feel about this, Robert, but a lot of it came from Standing Rock and being down in Standing Rock for that length of time and getting all the press like you always talk about and we try to talk about here. We're still here.
Right. No, Standing Rock was pivotal, right? It was kind of a new starting line of the contemporary, the modern movement. And it showed us a lot, that we could sort of go backward to go forward, did unprecedented things there. And it will always be kind of a new high water mark for me. And being there was a profound experience, really changed the way that I approach my work and my perspective. And this is a generational thing, right? And I don't know if we talked about this, but we've had an international documentary film crew hanging around the last few days, and they're putting together this story, and they're not quite sure what to write about, but they're looking at the Twin Cities metropolitan area and the history of activism and advocacy and the progress that's been made. And that's what I push on. We're in this generational change here, where there's old farts like you and me, but then there are young people like Haley and others who were raised with much more solid understandings of who they are as Native people, their languages, their cultures. They're on such firmer ground. And so when you see things like the progress that's been made since Standing Rock, there's the really deliberate efforts to reclaim the Native narrative through reclaiming Native truth, and locally that's branded as We Are Still Here, and we're all kind of working from the same strategies. And then when it just shows the power, when we unite our voices and work together in an Indigenous and collaborative way, we can do anything.
Yeah,
there's so many examples of that.
I think we had kind of a renaissance, at least film-wise, in the 90s, with Dancing with Kevin Costner and then Smoke Signals and, those things. But other than Smoke Signals, I really feel like it was not led directly by Native people as it is now.
Right. It wasn't us telling our stories. And if you go back 20 years before that, and we're old enough to remember, in the 70s, there was this little vogue more around performers like Cher, really lifting up her negative. Wayne Newton, all of a sudden, he became very negative. And then you had legitimate performers like Buffy St. Marie and things that were kind of there. But there was this little bit of vogue, and then it kind of went around. And then you're right. Then in the 90s, there were movies, but what's happening today, and like you said, since Standing Rock, is a whole different thing.
And that's a thing I'd like to talk about in the next segment when we get on there, is just how proud we are of our politicians. I mean, I talked about State Senator Mary Kunesh came today and got a heck of an ovation because I reminded the audience I was MC of the great work the trifecta has done here in Minnesota.
Yeah, unprecedented. So the trifecta that Robert's talking about is our governor's office, our state senate, and our state house are all under one party control. It happens to be our party, the Democratic Party, or Democratic Farmer Labor, as it's known here. And those guys went in, they said it. Their intent was to legislate with efficiency. And there's this piece going around from the governor's social media, Governor Waltz, around his whiteboard, with his legislative priorities. Listen, and it's done. Every single one. And it just feels good to have a government that can get things done and get things done in a good way.
Right. And it was hard for me to comprehend. And I know, Robert, you've been paying attention a lot more than I have to local politics. I did not ever see the stopgaps, or not the stopgaps, but how plugged up their government was 2 years ago.
Oh, yeah. And one of the things that's important to me in my roles here in the community, and I'm part of our regional government, right? I'm a representative on our Metropolitan Council, first Native person to serve on the Metropolitan Council. And what came out of the legislative session to support the transit that we operate, housing, a new $0.25 sales tax in the metro for housing, the first sufficient dedicated transit funding ever. And this has been a battle every year. We go in every year. We kind of have to fight with all the other legislative priorities to get transit. There are certain administrations that have been very anti-transit, and in this session, with the help of a few key legislators like Senator Dibble and Representative Horenstein, they passed a chunk of what will now be called baseline transit funding. So baseline means it'll just automatically appear in the budget. We don't have to compete for it, and that is huge, especially for our people who use transit.
Well, I was just going to say before we break, Robert, I feel like Dibble, who's been around a long time and has been an advocate of many things that Wendy and I have been following over the years, whether it's animal rights and things like that. And Hornstein, they all need a blanket after this. They be given.
Oh, yeah. Good idea.
discussion.
That was always Marlene's vision, that we were better at recognizing and honoring people. She would hold these honoring feasts at her church. So that could be honoring Marlene as well by giving them blankets.
Well, let's talk about that off air, because I think that's something with those two warriors that have really supported our community for many, many, many years and still do. Hey, I'm here with Robert Lilligren, Native American Community Development Institute CEO, White Earth person. I want to say resident, but that's not right. We'll be right back after this short break.
Stay with us.
J&S Bean Factory is a native-owned, community-supported, cozy, artsy coffee shop which offers roasted on-site beans, live music, and baked goods. Relax in the beautiful outside patio. City Pages writes, voted top 10 coffee shops. Tucked into a quiet corner of St. Paul's Highland Park neighborhood, this coffee shop roasts beans on-site from the best coffee-growing countries in the world. Located at 1518 Randolph Avenue, St. Paul. The good stuff.
Life is a journey, and the Doherty Family College at the University of St. Thomas will help you get where you want to go. Located in downtown Minneapolis, this affordable 2-year college provides free textbooks, a laptop, meals, career coaches, and a Metro Transit pass, making DFC the perfect pathway to a bachelor's degree. Turn your dreams into reality at Doherty Family College at the University of St. Thomas. Apply today at dfc.stthomas.edu.
Hey, Olgama, I've been hearing a lot about this term, climate justice. What is that?
Climate justice is recognizing that the negative impacts of climate change don't affect all people equally. It also means transitioning from a fossil fuel-based economy to a more sustainable future. MN350 is one of the groups that's pushing for this transition to protect our futures. You can even get involved too.
That's great, especially since I'm concerned about pipeline projects like Line 3. How can I help MN350?
Just find them on Facebook or visit mn350.org.
One of the best things about living in Golden Valley is that it celebrates the LGBTQ community. Did you know that Golden Valley has more LGBTQ households per capita than any city in Minnesota? Did you also know that the Golden Valley Pride Festival was the first suburban pride festival in Minnesota? On Saturday, June 10th, come to Brookview Park in Golden Valley for the Golden Valley Pride Festival from noon to 6 p.m. and celebrate our 5th anniversary. The festival highlights our LGBTQ families, their friends, and allies in the spirit of promoting greater understanding of Golden Valley's rich and growing diversity. The event will feature 2 stages with live performances all day, food trucks and food vendors, a kids area with games, a beer, wine, and cider tent, as well as more than 70 community, business, and sponsor tents and exhibitors. There will also be kickball and volleyball games. Go to goldenvalleypride.com for more information. That's goldenvalleypride.com. We can't wait to see you at Golden Valley Pride Festival.
Tune to Connections Radio on June 3rd at 9 a.m. to learn how to transform power struggles and conflict into meaningful conversation and internal freedom. Yvette Erasmussen is a teacher, writer, and psychologist who integrates core insights from multiple wisdom traditions. She draws from psychology, Semitic theories, nonviolent communication, as well as insights from more than 25 years of international teaching, coaching, and therapy. Yvette will be on Connections Radio Saturday, June 3rd at 9 a.m.
Hey, this is Robert Pilot. I taught in St. Paul Public Schools for over 25 years, and I want you to join the team and make a difference in our children's future. Right now, St. Paul Public Schools is offering hiring and retention bonuses up to $10,000 for a variety of teaching and classroom support positions for the next school year. Grow in a supportive and fulfilling public school setting. Limited bonuses are available, so don't delay. Apply at spps.org/careers.
With your AM 950 weather, I'm Brett Johnson. Look for clear skies tonight with a low around 52, Friday sunny with a high near 78, and Saturday sunny with a high around 80. Spring has arrived and it's time to take a good look at your lawn. If there's bare spots or brown patches, Natural Lawn can help. For over 30 years, Natural Lawn has taken an environmentally friendly approach to lawn care to feed your soil without unnecessary chemicals. Beat the summer rush and visit naturallawn.com.
Hi, this is Representative Sharice Davids from Kansas. I'm Ho Chunk, and you're listening to Native Roots Radio.
And we're back to Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake, and this is Robert Pilot.
This portion of the show is supported by the Native American Community Clinic on Franklin Avenue in Minneapolis, honoring health and tradition.
Thank you, Haley. Yes, they do. And hey, I'm here with Robert Lilligren, and wow, I just was listening to one of the ads, and Golden Valley Pride sounds like a big happenings that I did not know about.
Yeah, who knew? Who knew? I didn't know they had the highest per capita households of LGBT people, or that they had the first suburban pride. So, yeah, you learn something new every day listening to your show.
Well, I like to think of it as our show because, I was trying to spit out the words that you were a white earth citizen, and I couldn't come up with the word citizen, but we like to call ourselves citizens as opposed to members because we are the citizens of our tribes. Yeah, that was really interesting. Why don't we jump into the Clyde Belcourt Urban Indigenous Legacy Initiative that has been one of the things that you've been working on, but other groups working in tandem and harmony together with the Capitol and the traction that that's gotten this past session.
Yeah, it's been really amazing. And just the evolution of how we got to where we are today is something that just delights me. And so we named it for Clyde Belcourt, our revered ancestor. Then it's the Urban Indian Legacy Initiative. And I haven't been in the leadership of this. I want to be really clear. I've been very supportive and involved, but it's young leaders like Marissa Cummings and Joe Hobart and Louise Matson who have been really moving it out. But it was a strategy to go to the legislature this year to get capital investment from the state into the urban Indian organizations' facilities. And we have these aging facilities, many of us, they're barely safe maybe, and they need some definite capital infusion. And so there were, I think, 15 participating organizations. We put all of our needs in a document, and then working with lobbyists, we recruited elected senators and representatives to carry these bills. We had hearings that we appeared at and went through the process. It really elevated the profile of Native orgs and some of the needs in our communities, and it was fairly successful. I think maybe 5 of the projects that were on our list of the 15 were funded to some level. That's not 100%, but it's something, right? And we're already meeting in a couple of weeks under the leadership of Marissa Cummings of Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center to start planning for the next session and how we'll go back and how we'll work together. And it's collaborative. It puts us in a posture where we're not competing with each other like the system wants us to do, and to compete for resources and compete for service personnel. And instead, over the last maybe 7 years or so, the organizational leadership in the Twin Cities has been really deliberate about building ways to collaborate, to indigenize the way that we come together and throw off this colonized yoke that incentivizes us to view each other as enemies and competitors. That scarcity mentality, right? And embrace mentality of plenty. And it's just a joy to see.
It is. And it's funny that you said 7 years ago because We were talking earlier about Standing Rock and the 7
Mm.
fires, the 8 fires that left Standing Rock, and at the same time, you're talking about this major collaboration, and we're talking about, a paradigm shift in many ways of how
Mhm.
people picture us, but how we picture ourselves.
Right, that's exactly right, and it's important for us to picture ourselves in a different way, right? And it's amazing how often in myself or I work with these incredibly talented young Native professionals, and every so often something will just kind of percolate up that really comes from a perspective of scarcity or something a little more colonized. And I think, wow, we should know better. We should know better than this. But man, that can run kind of deep and strong. And so it's a constant awareness that we need to be building, and then to not succumb, right? Not to fall into those old patterns, but to keep embracing each other as collaborators, as relatives, and it's a paradigm shift.
And I think too, that we can, and I don't mean this to be harsh, but we can call out or call on people when they aren't coming at us in a good way, I think better than we could prior to. And that's just like a feeling again with the paradigm shift. We started this show Native Roots Radio during Standing Rock too. So
Oh,
that's something, because of all the misinformation that was being sent out of there. And so it's kind of a starting point for me to really to see the whole community in a whole.
I think that's a beautiful perspective, Robert. And the idea of holding each other accountable, right? If you want to say call out or just identifying when things aren't being authentic and things aren't being indigenous. And you're right. I think we're stronger now where those kinds of statements of accountability aren't just going to blow everything up, right? Like maybe a few years ago, if someone got called out, that might be the end of a conversation. You can go into the next conversation. And instead, now we're having serious conversations, deliberations about what kind of Native culture are we, and especially in a complicated urban environment where you have scores of tribes represented and not the formal sovereignty of living in a Native nation. And so we come together and, we have these, are we a shunning culture here? Are we a reconciling and healing culture? Both are legitimate Native approaches. What do we want to
Mm.
be? How do we want to do it? And again, going to this generational thing, I see this in a lot of the younger people in the community, the younger emerging leadership, where they're more comfortable with this
Mhm.
idea of lifting up issues that need to be addressed to hold ourselves accountable. And I like it.
I love it, and I think too, Robert, that Uh, th we talk about these things that have happened to us in boarding school. I really feel like, personally, for me, my family has lost 2 generations,
Mhm.
and part of the renaissance with our young ones and wanting to learn and feel strong about, doing things in a good way, has really, it hasn't affected this generation as much as possibly my parents and my grandparents.
And I think that's right, right? So my dad was raised by someone who was a victim of the boarding school system and who was taught to despise our language and culture and
Mm,
ridicule it. And that's the environment my dad was raised in. And then as he aged, he became really an important part of the Ojibwe language reclamation movement here in the 70s and 80s, 90s. He would go to many language tables and just start to reclaim the language. But it's a journey. You have to bridge that, right? Bridge that deliberate disruption in
mm,
culture that was very effective. Those boarding schools where they beat people's children's language and cultures out of them. Those they knew what they were doing, and they
right.
made people fearful of re-embracing their culture. And so get through us, and get to the next generations, and they have less of that fear. Their
Mhm.
influences are some of our founding founders, as I call them, people like Clyde Belcour, Laura Waterman, all these folks who we're losing, who are walking on now. But so we're having generational strength that's being built. And I was just talking about this today with these documentary filmmakers, and because it's current, there's kind of a trend in circles conversations I'm in, where people don't want to talk about historical trauma because it's not historical. It is current. It is in our lives every day. And so they feel like the term historical maybe gives us a little bit of buffering or comfort, and we shouldn't be comfortable with it. And but just talking about how I can see from our place, we're about the same age, in the generational trajectory, just how deep it feels, because that trauma is real and it's there every day. But if you look at it historically, it's not really that long. And here in Minnesota, it's maybe 150, 200 years. In this country, it's maybe 500 years. Yeah, that's a long time, but it's not forever, right? Our people have been here for millennia, and we are still here. And so I'm starting to get to this place where I think that it might be possible to get beyond that trauma that we're feeling. It's not as deep as it feels.
Right. Well, it's so funny. We always joked, and I don't mind repeating what we've talked about in the past, because I think it's really poignant. And also, we have new listeners all the time. But, when in 1978, you talk about school and all these Indians came out of the woodwork in your school when
Right.
they were recognizing Native Americans in your school. I grew up with Ho Chunks. I always knew I was Winnebago. From being adopted. And I had no idea until, 10 years ago that they're Ho Chunk.
Yeah,
That these people
interesting. Yeah, that was my experience, right? I've shared that story before. I graduated from high school in 1978 from a large suburban school here in the Twin Cities, 720 people in my class. And just because it was 1978 and there was more awareness and important pieces of legislation were being passed in DC around education, Native culture, Native religious practices. So suddenly there was an awareness, and at my high school, they hosted a lunch for the Native graduates, and they must have got our names off of tribal enrollment, tribal rolls. And so there was 12 of us that they could identify out of this class of 720 people. And these were people, many of them, that I had gone through school with from kindergarten to senior year and never knew they were Native. And some of you'd look at them and you go, yeah, of course you're Indian, how did I not know that? But we did not, we had disincentive for self-identifying as Native, right? It was riskier to identify as Native. And so it wasn't until this event that we finally did that. And now it's hard to imagine that even happening in a public school here in Minnesota anyway. People young students are proud, they're expressing their culture, and it's a very different thing in our lifetimes, right? In a fairly short amount of time.
And that's why I brought that up, because of what you were saying, that, how far we've come, and that the bright the light at the end of the tunnel is not an oncoming train.
Right.
There are good things happening, and maybe 10, 15 years ago, we didn't feel that way. Hey, I'm here with Robert Lilligren, and we're doing a whole show together, White Earth Citizen. We'll be right back after this short break. Please stay with us. Minnesota has the only original wolf population in the continental United States.
And 80% of Minnesotans believe the wolf should be protected.
Howling for Wolves is asking Minnesotans to respect our true wildlife manager, the wolf.
Their survival is critical to our ecosystems, our communities, and even our economy.
As highly intelligent animals with strong social bonds, Minnesota wolves deserve to be protected and admired.
Learn more at howlingforwolves.org. Let's live and let howl.
When it comes to mental health, making connections with others can be a way forward. How do you reach out when you need someone? What do you do to support those who struggle? Connections can bring comfort, hope, and joy. Find ways that work for yourself and others, like sending a text, sharing a moment, offering a hug, seeing an old friend, creating space to listen. Visit cmentalhealth.org. That's cmentalhealth.org. cmentalhealth.org.
J&S Bean Factory is a native-owned, community-supported, cozy, artsy coffee shop which offers roasted on-site beans, live music, and baked goods. Relax in the beautiful outside patio. City Pages writes, voted top 10 coffee shops. Tucked into a quiet corner of St. Paul's Highland Park neighborhood, this coffee shop roasts beans on-site from the best coffee-growing countries in the world. Located at 1518 Randolph Avenue, St. Paul. The good stuff.
Hey, this is Robert Pilot. I taught in St. Paul Public Schools for over 25 years, and I want you to join the team and make a difference in our children's future. Right now, St. Paul Public Schools is offering hiring and retention bonuses up to $10,000 for a variety of teaching and classroom support positions for the next school year. Grow in a supportive and fulfilling public school setting. Limited bonuses are available, so don't delay. Apply at spps.org/careers.
You're listening to Native Roots Radio. This is Spirit from Reservation Dogs. Get up and listen.
Welcome back to Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake, and this is Robert Pilot.
This portion of the show is supported by Howling for Wolves, protecting wolves for future generations. Howl!
Hey, we're here with Robert Lilligren, and Robert always cracks me up to hear every time I hear Dallas Goldtooth do that for us. He was a guest, and I asked him to do a radio tag, and I didn't expect him to do that. What he did, I just thought he would say, "Hey, this is Dallas Goldtooth of Reservation Dogs," but he did it in character.
Very well.
I still laugh when I hear it.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, and speaking of the Renaissance, there's those guys, Bobby Wilson was on the show a couple times, and we always have to be careful with the dump button because Bobby likes to swear on live radio. But I've known Bobby as a kid at Harding, and the one he wrote one of the shows. He's a writer on Reservation Dogs, and he was on and he does some spot acting too for them, and he was on he was a writer on Rutherford Falls too, but he did the whole piece, and I don't know if it was familiar to you. He wrote that whole piece when Cheese was put into a home, because for years he worked, first he was in Enda Young, and then he worked for Enda Young, and that's how he met Dallas Goldtooth.
Interesting. I did not know that. And so Enda Young is a place in St. Paul that provides housing for homeless Native youth, and there's not a lot of that kind of housing going on, and so they're just incredibly important here. And so no, I didn't know that. I did know because he used to hang around here more, along the cultural corridor and things, and he's just a fascinating person, and very respectful to me anyway as an elder and stuff. And I learned that he was actually born in a house in the Phillips area, not far from Franklin Avenue. And
Are you speaking of Bobby?
Yeah.
Are you speaking of Bobby or Dallas?
Bobby.
Oh, okay,
Bobby
cool.
Wilson.
Bobby.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have been clear. But I thought he's a young man, and I thought not that many people his age were probably born at home in the middle of the Phillips neighborhood, so intriguing.
I had, what was that show on Comedy Central? It's still on. What's the news show I'm thinking of? On Comedy Central.
The Daily Show?
I'm sorry, The Daily Show.
Yeah.
So they did this piece, and I hadn't seen Bobby in years since he was a student, and I knew he was in the comedy troupe, and he'd come back and MC for things. And I mean, I talked to him for just a short time, but this was like, I want to say 2015, 16, 14, somewhere around there. And he was on the Daily Show was interviewing these people about the Washington football name at the time.
Right.
And they were going, it's honoring them, and it's all this. And then all of a sudden, what, the Daily Show does, a wall opened up and all these natives came out, and Bobby was one of them.
I remember that episode. I was watching it.
That's Bobby Wilson.
Right. And those, Bobby Wilson and they were all kind of, stone faced, and it really changed the discussion. Yeah, it was this group, right? The 1491s. Is that?
Yeah,
it was something.
Yeah, and that's got them going on Reservation Dogs. That's the same 4 people, and if people don't know out there, Google it or go to YouTube and watch the 1491ers, and they're hilarious. And there's a lot of inside jokes and some parodies, and that really brought them to this place where they're at now nationally, and speaking our truth and making fun of ourselves. And I always say, Robert, it was like it's kind of watching the Flintstones. The adults would get one version of the Flintstones and the kids would get the other, with the inside jokes. And that's Reservation Dogs for us too. It's like, oh, this is funny, this is for everybody. I mean,
Right. You
there's some
wonder if
inside jokes.
non-native folks are getting the joke, right?
Well, most people I talk to really love that show that are non-natives, so that's really good to hear. And they're going to be coming in August. I think the first week of August is that their season 3 is coming up for Reservation Dogs.
Exciting.
Can you believe it's 3 years though? I mean,
No, I can't. That's amazing. And it's just, it shows that sustainability, right? People are interested in these stories now in a way they weren't before, native and non-native people. And it makes native people contemporary, right? And up until a few years, I remember this research that went into creating reclaiming native truth strategies, the narrative change strategies. And it was almost the research so that almost half the people in the United States did not know that Native people still existed today.
Whoa.
Native people were relegated to history, right? So that's interesting. But really the kind of asset there was that like 80% of American people wanted to know more about Native people. And so that's where Reservation Dogs and all this media, the movies coming out, the red carpets and things, people are really interested.
Right. Tommy Orange was on our show when his book first came out, there. And he had said it taken him quite a few years to write that book. And that because of Standing Rock, he had a voice and people were really paying attention. So I thought that was really interesting. Go ahead.
I agree. And that's a book I recommend. I get to address a lot of non-native groups, speak to them and things. And that's a book that I recommend as a resource. And for me, he's a different generation than us. But he talks about the urban Indian experience in a way that really resonated with me. It felt like, yeah, this is like my experience.
Wow.
And I like that he uses the term urban Indian and how it moves that into common vocabulary. It's an identity that many of us are kind of working to define. And there's that Decolonizing Wealth by Will and Wave. He used another one. He uses the term urban Indian. And I like that. And so when I'm talking to non-native groups, I'll describe myself as a 3rd generation Minneapolis urban Indian. And then give them permission to use that term, urban Indian. People are never quite sure what they can and can't say.
Right, exactly. Hey, I was what was it, 2 days ago? I was on Franklin Avenue. I didn't make your I was at a big meeting downtown St. Paul, so I feel bad I didn't make your open house. But what I was able to do 2 days ago is to go in and see that great show you have at All My Relations Gallery, the beautiful beadwork. And I could have just stayed there in hours and looking at this stuff. And regalia, just male regalia and
creative words. I mean, but it all has kind of a contemporary angle. So the show is called Pidwewe Tom, Making His Medicine. And it's a traveling exhibit. It came down from Thunder Bay. And it is the story of a family that suffered a great loss, a tragic, traumatizing loss. And to deal with that loss, they started to create, and so the show is an outcome of the work that they did. And I will tell you, Robert, we get a lot of positive feedbacks about all of the shows we do in our All My Relations Arts Gallery. That we've never had any response like this. This is by far the most positive response that we've gotten from any show. So if you're in the cities, I urge you to come down to All My Relations Arts Gallery on the American Indian Cultural Corridor. Powhatan is up till June 10th, and it is awe-inspiring.
Wow, great plug. And it really is. Robert, thank you so much for hanging in there with the whole show together. I had a great time.
Me too. I'm losing my voice a little.
Hey, if you're listening to the show, you are part of the resistance from Chief Plentycoops. The ground in which we stand on is sacred ground. It's the blood of our ancestors. We need to resist, divest, join a group, run for office, vote. We're still here. We are the 7th generation. Free Leonard Peltier now.
Get a head start in your summer reading. The locally owned Next Chapter Booksellers has an